Great. From Durbanville, Constantia, Helderberg, Komiki, Kalsrivier, Paul, Pretoria, Tableview. I'm sure everyone has the same. East London. Oh, good. We've got quite a few people joining from all over the show. So great, cool. Salt River, Benoni. Oh yeah, London, UK. Stellenbosch. Great. So I think let's get starting because we've got quite a bit of a run up today. So thank you once again, everyone, for joining this AI series that STBB is hosting. My name is Liani Steenkamp, and I will be, I'm heading up the marketing department. And today's session is really about, can I use AI instead of my attorney? For those of you that joined the first session, you would know that we spoke about what is AI really, how does it affect our lives, and exactly just, you know, the ins and outs of AI. Quite an in-depth series or session. If you missed it, you're more than welcome to request the recording. If you were registered, you would have received the recording already. So like I said, today we're going to be diving in exactly what the impact is in the legal space. And I've asked our colleagues to join. So today's session will be presented by Refqah Ho-Yee, Liezl Solomon, Stefan Hougaard, and Claassen. And that is going to be all about exactly whether AI can be used instead of your attorney. So I think the big question that I have and that I wanted to post, because we've got such a nice big group, is what do you think? Can I use AI instead of my attorney? So maybe let's get some feedback from the group. No. Great. Okay, so we had 96% saying that no, we cannot replace our attorneys. Let's maybe give it one more minute, get all the feedback in from the participants. Great. So, okay, we're sticking at like 96% of people saying that, no, we cannot replace our attorney. So you'll see the results on your end. 96%, no, I cannot replace my attorney. So that's good news for you guys presenting today. But so without further ado, I want to start today's session. I just want to share a few house rules with you so that we can just get them out as well. So first of all, please remain muted. We are going to allow some time for questions at the end of the session, but you're more than welcome to post them throughout the session in the chat, and we'll collate them and get to them at the end of the session. There is going to be a meeting recording of today's session, and we will be sharing that 24 hours after the session. So if you've registered and you've missed today's session, or you want to review today's session, you will get them on get that on email. Then unfortunately, we won't be sharing the presentation slides as such, but like I said, the recording will be shared. Post your comments, questions. We would love also to get your feedback. You can post them all in the chat and we can take it from there. So without further ado, I'm going to start off and hand over to my colleague, Claassen, who will be starting the session on how to or whether AI can actually replace attorneys.
Thank you, Liani. Good morning, everyone. On Tuesday, Brent presented a webinar on artificial intelligence generally and how it works. This session's focus will not so much be on the inner workings of AI, but rather we will be addressing the simple question of whether AI will replace attorneys, or put differently, whether you as a client can approach or use AI instead of your attorney. We will be covering different fields of law. I'll be starting off with corporate and commercial law and tax. Secondly, Liezl Solomon will be discussing conveyancing. And thereafter, Refqah Ho-Yee will be covering wills and estates. And finally, Stefan Hougaard will be ending off with litigation. So let me set the scene first. Every morning, the empty chairs start to fill up one by one as the employees start to find their way to their desks for another day in the life of an attorney or paralegal. Some arrive with coffee, others drop their stuff and find their way to the kitchen to make a cup of wake me up. The commercial attorneys, of course, are already on their second cup, busy drafting that agreement which seeks to simplify the most complex transaction so that the parties can understand what they actually meant. As Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. put it, lawyers spend a great deal of their time shoveling smoke. Then there is that one director or partner who walks into the open plan office area with his eyes fixed on his phone and a curious frown on his face. Have you guys seen this ChatGPT thing? And needless to say, a few days later, everyone has. And now every second firm wants to present a webinar on it to share their thoughts. Note that even though I will be referring to ChatGPT, it is only one of many forms of artificial intelligence out there. AI is revolutionizing the legal industry, offering transformative benefits to attorneys. In this webinar, we will be discussing how leveraging AI technologies, attorneys can enhance legal research, streamline document analysis, improve contract management, and utilize predictive analytics. These advancements not only increase efficiency and accuracy, but also empower attorneys to provide better counsel and deliver enhanced services to their clients. So moving on to commercial law and tax. I think it is important for me to sketch a bit of a background on what we as commercial attorneys do, so that there is some context to what I will be saying on AI. Those of you who have made use of our services will, of course, have some idea what our work entails. But put simply, we help clients with the negotiation, preparation, and drafting of agreements, and we guide our clients through the legal hurdles of certain transactions. It can be simple, a simple transaction, such as disposing of property from a natural person's estate to a company, or it could involve a series of complex transactions as part of, for example, the restructuring of a group of companies, and which involves trusts. Think of how you can move assets between companies, effect share buybacks, there's subscription for or the disposal of shares. You may be someone who wants to purchase a piece of land in order to start a development, but you have no funding. Perhaps you find an investor and you want to enter into a joint venture agreement with it. Agreements need to be in place to regulate the relationship between yourself and the investor and to, for example, protect your share in the profits. So depending on the nature of the contemplated transaction or series of transactions, a myriad of different laws and pieces of legislation might have a bearing on the legality of a transaction or agreement, or how one would go about arriving at the desired result or outcome. Think of the Companies Act, the National Credit Act, the Consumer Protection Act, etc. Non-compliance can mean that your contract is void, or that an interested party can apply to court to have it declared void. And it is our job to navigate you through this field of legal landmines. Of course, where there are transactions, there are tax consequences. This opens up a whole new can of worms. Think of the Income Tax Act, which regulates inter alia the taxation of profits, capital gains tax, dividends tax, and donations tax. You have the VAT Act, the Transfer Duty Act, and Securities Transfer Tax Act. Many different kinds of taxes can play a role at in what you want to do. Tax consequences, which you might not be aware of, can bring about a painful cash flow knock. So we therefore always consider not only the legal hurdles, but also the tax consequences to find the best course of action for our clients. But sometimes we do not know what the legal position is, or we are unsure of exactly what the tax consequences are. In such cases, we are forced to do some research. So a couple of weeks ago, I found myself researching a legal question which I could not answer without the authoritative reasoning of a judgment, basically a court case. As I was unable to find a court case on Juta, LexisNexis, or Safely, I decided to give ChatGPT a go as a last resort. I entered the legal question on the chat, and within seconds, it spit out an extremely well-written answer. I asked it to substantiate its answer with reference to court cases, and it replied with no less than 6 case names and citations. So satisfied with the result, I decided to call it a day and read the cases in the morning. The following morning, I copied and pasted the case names and citations into Juta. However, it yielded no results. So I asked GPT where I can find the cases. Safely, it said. A search on 5 of the 6 cases yielded no results. However, the 6th referred me to a criminal law case. The case name differed, but the citation was the same as the apparent civil law case it gave me. I was busy with commercial property law, specifically the powers of homeowners associations, not criminal law. So subsequently, I told ChatGPT that the cases are not on Safely. It reverted with an apology and said that on second perusal, the cases can be found in the Property Law Digest. This was also a false claim. Notably, there were similar incidents in the US and in New Zealand where lawyers gave inaccurate legal advice because they failed to verify ChatGPT's answers. So the risk of giving flawed legal advice or drafting an agreement with an incorrect legal position in mind is therefore very real. It is therefore imperative for attorneys to verify the accuracy and completeness of any material or opinions provided by AI, especially a well-meaning language AI tool such as ChatGPT. Also, if you, for example, want to save costs and draft your own agreement by using ChatGPT, or you want to use AI for legal or tax advice, you run the risk of not asking AI the right questions. Some of your inputs may generate a correct output for you to use, but all the necessary information may not be included. We find that it's not always about what the client says, but what the client doesn't say. There might be crucial information which you don't mention, and ChatGPT, for example, is not that advanced at this stage to prompt the correct questions to supplement the information in order for it to give you the correct advice or propose the best course of action based on all the relevant information. We as attorneys are trained to ask the right questions, to engage in discussions with you as the client, and to filter all the information and provide tailor-made solutions. Nevertheless, there are some significant benefits to artificial intelligence. Despite my experience, it can help with legal research. It's also useful for document analysis, review, and contract management. To give a bit of a background here, I think most of you will be aware of workflow systems. You can, for example, enter certain inputs into a program, such as the details of parties to an agreement and the essential terms, and it will spit out a very basic agreement. This is not AI, because AI involves some form of decision-making between the input and the output. There's some intelligence involved. So with document analysis, you can, for example, insert an agreement or other document on the AI platform, and it can extract certain information for you. It can recognize the type of agreement, validate certain terms, but it cannot really at this stage of AI's development analyze the information and do something with it. So for example, to enter the extracted information into a transformer model so that it can say, give you a few options on how to structure the transaction differently for better tax outcomes. But I think we will get there if enough people are interested in essentially funding such a project. So let me read you what ChatGPT said on document analysis and review. AI technologies excel at document analysis, which is crucial in both commercial and litigation practices. Machine learning algorithms can quickly review and categorize large volumes of documents, such as contracts, agreements, and discovery materials. AI can identify potential risks, anomalies, and discrepancies, allowing attorneys to focus on critical areas that require their expertise. This technology significantly speeds up the document review process, increases accuracy, and reduces costs associated with manual review. And on contract management, the AI chatbot said the following: contracts are the backbone of commercial transactions, and AI can greatly aid attorneys in managing contracts throughout their life cycle. AI-powered contract management systems can extract and organize essential contract data, such as key terms, obligations, and expiration dates. These systems can also assist in identifying potential risks, such as non-compliance or missing clauses, ensuring contracts are thorough and in alignment with legal requirements. AI can also automate contract generation, simplifying the drafting process and reducing errors. Note that the current AI models out there, such as ChatGPT-4, cannot at this stage take in large chunks of data and spit out a contract, for example. So large volumes of inputs and outputs at this stage is not possible. It simply cannot handle it. Furthermore, it is not advisable at this stage to use AI for legal advice, because the risk of so-called hallucinations, which is basically the term for errors in the AI space, are too great. Rather, approach your attorney for advice and to help you draft a bulletproof agreement. So that covers commercial and tax law. I now hand over to Liezl Solomon to discuss conveyancing.
Morning, everyone. My name's Liezl. I am a conveyancer at our SCBB office in Cape Town. And as I hope most of you know, conveyancers play quite a crucial role in property transactions in South Africa, facilitating the transfer of ownership and ensuring legal compliance. As we've heard from Marco, the question as to whether AI has the potential to replace attorneys has sparked quite a debate, especially in South Africa. And I'm going to be discussing conveyancing in like my chat. So conveyancing is a complex legal process, as I hope most of our clients know, and it involves the transfer of property ownership from one person to another. So conveyancers handle various tasks, such as verifying property ownership, deeds office, conducting deeds office searches, drafting and reviewing legal contracts, documents, OTPs, all of that, applying to municipalities, homeowners associations, managing agents for clearances, and also facilitating financial transactions. So FICA compliance and KYC, know your client assessments, and then obviously finally registering property in the deeds registry. So this possesses extensive legal knowledge and expertise, and ensuring that the compliance of all the various laws that encompass conveyancing are adhered to. I'd say this is the biggest part of the governing of property transactions in South Africa. So AI technology has made some significant strides over the past couple of years, particularly in the field of what we call natural language processing and machine learning. I think Brent discussed this quite extensively in his talk on Tuesday, but these advancements have enabled us, or the AI systems, to perform some tasks such as document analysis, data extraction, commercial contract management, contract review, with a high degree of accuracy and efficiency. So in some cases, AI platforms can even generate legal documents based on predefined templates and standardized clauses with the correct prompt from the legal professional. So I think this is what Marco was saying. The correct prompt from the legal professional is one of the most important aspects of utilizing AI properly. So you do need some form of expertise or legal background to get the benefit from AI, and I'll be discussing these benefits with you. So first off, I'm going to start with AI. Obviously, I think of most of you who have used ChatGPT or understand it quite a bit, some people don't, but is to enhance your turnaround time of things. So drafting, getting things out quickly, popping an email. So AI can produce and process vast amounts of data very quickly and accurately. So it reduces your time that's required for drafting of documents and document review and analysis. So it could expedite property transactions, resulting in a faster turnaround time, which is, I think, what we all hope for when it comes to passing of transfer of our properties. The second benefit, which has already come into play and I think will be enhanced even more now with the use of AI, is the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act. We'll call it ECTA. which has had a significant impact already on the South African property law system and conveyancing in South Africa. So by recognizing electronic communications, transactions, contracts, it's revolutionized the way property transactions are conducted, prompting efficiency, accessibility, convenience while upholding the necessary legal safeguards. So while ICTA provides a legal framework for electronic communications and transactions within property law and within the conveyancing practice, there are still some exceptions, as we all know, and requirements that need to be adhered to. So, for example, the alienation of land on a contract still cannot be signed with an electronic signature. We require our clients to sign contracts in wet ink still. And this is a very good example of the human experience that is still needed. So that emotional intelligence and nuanced decision-making that we still do require despite AI. And Stefan Hougaard will discuss this more, sort of the emotive part, which AI hasn't fully developed to yet, which we still rely on in our practice daily. Thirdly, I think a big benefit for AI in conveyancing is that it can minimize that human error. So we all know the smallest mistake within a conveyancing transaction can render our entire transfer, sort of like make it it's not good. So we are very meticulous when it comes to conveyancing. So in South Africa, despite the common belief, we have an extremely thorough deeds registry system, one of the best in the world. It protects all parties involved, and it goes through so many checks, different officials in the deeds registry within the conveyancing offices, and there's a very low chance of error because of all these thorough checks. And I think with the inclusion of AI, we really will get to a point where we can minimize the human error by making use of AI within the conveyancing process. The fourth advantage that we've got is the Electronic Deeds Registration System Act of 2019. So this again represented a huge significant step towards digitizing the property registration process in South Africa. So by embracing technology and electronic system, this act aimed to enhance efficiency, transparency, accessibility for the registration of property and deeds, and ultimately benefiting the property owner as well as the stakeholders involved. So with ICTA, and together with the application of AI, there are several benefits. So the first one being data processing and analysis. So AI can assist the efficient processing and analysis of vast amounts of data at the same time. So this data extraction, as we would call it, would include obtaining a lot of information from various different documents, identifying inconsistencies or errors and performing data validation. So the AI algorithms can streamline these tasks, saving the conveyancer, the paralegal, so much time and reducing the risk of human error. So for example, if we get a client from an ID, you can say, the AI can pick up, is this an ID document? Is it a valid ID document? Is it the ID document of the person that signed the affidavit or the declarations? So data processing and analysis is a big benefit from AI. Then, like I said, document verification. So AI can be utilized to verify authenticity, integrity of electronic documents submitted for registration. We find this a lot in our bank work. So when we do electronic signatures for our banks, if we're on the panels and we've been instructed, this machine learning algorithm can compare different documents, the signatures of the client, and the relevant features that identify potential forgery or tampering of documents. So it'll help to ensure trustworthiness within an electronic registration system going forward. The next one, and we'll discuss FICA in a little bit in our risk management compliance programs, but risk assessment and fraud detection is such a big advantage that AI can offer. So AI techniques can be employed to identify potential risks, detect fraud activities with the electronic deeds registration system. By analyzing historical data patterns, AI algorithms can detect any sort of anomaly, suspicious transactions, irregularities that may cause fraudulent behavior. So this can prevent fraudulent property registrations taking place in the future by this risk assessment and fraud detection. Then the NLP, so natural language processing, again, Brett went into quite a bit of detail on Tuesday, but NLP algorithms can be used to extract information from unstructured text. So property contracts, legal documents, and any COVID sort of structured data can be used with document generators. So it'll enable automated data entry by the conveyancer and reduces manual effort of required into processing that and inputting that information on the electronic system itself. The next benefit is intelligent search and retrieval. So AI-powered search algorithms can enhance the search capabilities with the electronic deeds registration system. So algorithms can understand natural language queries, improve search accuracy, retrieve relevant information more efficiently. So this can benefit both the user and the administrator by simplifying the process of accessing property information and documents. So this is when we're doing deed searches or property searches, or when estate agents are using CMA or virtual agents. So this intelligent search retrieval can really sort of simplify the process for you, because it's got all of it going on in the background, but it also expedites search queries for us. And then lastly, decision support. Like I said, you do need that emotive aspect that only a human can offer at this time, but AI can provide decision support to stakeholders involved in property registrations by analyzing historical data, patterns. Algorithms can offer insights, predictions, and recommendations when it comes to the human decision making. So not only for the conveyancer, but also for the property practitioner when there's stats being prepared, valuations being done, it can really be a big benefit. So just quickly on Poppy, I think it's important to note that the integration of AI into the electronic deeds registration system should be done with very careful consideration when it comes to our clients' privacy, security, and the ethical concerns in terms of the Protection of Personal Information Act. So safeguards will have to be implemented like we currently do have. The same protocol will have to be followed when it comes to AI technologies and personal information and private information involved. So I think this current protocol we have in respect of Poppy and consent will be continued through the various AI technologies as they carry on being developed. Then on FICA, I think this is quite a big question that everyone's had, and how AI can assist us with our FICA, our risk management compliance programs, and our duties as FICA officers in respect of property transactions. So firstly, I think the introduction of AI can really help identify potential issues or risks in property transactions. It can assist us with transaction monitoring. So it is a powered system that can monitor financial transactions in real time. So it can flag any suspicious or potentially illicit activities. And these systems can analyze vast amount of data. So transactional patterns, customer behavior, external factors, like identifying potential money laundering, terrorist financing, and any other financial crimes could be picked up with AI technology. Then risk assessment. We all have our RMCPs and our duty with our FICA compliance that all officers have. So the AI algorithms can actually help assess the risk associated with our customers, any business or the transaction in alignment with your company or the firm and their RMCP. So by analyzing various data points such as customer profiles, transaction history, in industry trends, AI can provide risk scores and alerts for us. So we know when to flag a client or when it's a high risk client that we're dealing with. Compliance and reporting. So AI can automate the process of monitoring compliance with anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. So they can analyze large volumes, like I've said, of data from multiple sources, ensuring that financial institutions adhere to their reporting requirements, identifying suspicious activities, and they generate accurate reports for us and for the regulatory authorities. Identity verification. So AI can enhance the know your customer KYC processes that we all go through by verifying the identity of our customers through automated document analysis. So facial recognition, biometric technologies. This helps prevent identity theft, fraud, and any other illegal activities, which I think is a massive, massive advantage and huge tool. Pattern recognition, like I said, AI can pick up on historical patterns and any interconnected data to sort of uncover previously unknown risks and assist with investigators in the building comprehensive cases. So this is more for the FEEC themselves, a huge assistance for that. Predictive analytics, again, by using the analytics tool, predicting future risks, future trends as we go forward in the emerging market and the different changing conditions, highlighting potential areas of concern. It'll enhance due diligence. So AI-powered systems can assist in conducting enhanced due diligence on high-risk customers or businesses. And this is due diligence in any aspect, be it clients, be it the property, be involved, analyzing the data from various sources, public records, social media, news articles, and it can give us a comprehensive background, flagging any sort of reputational risk or client risk that might be involved. And then lastly, fraud detection, and I think this sort of rounds it up. It can detect and prevent fraudulent activities within a financial system. So by continuously monitoring transactions and analyzing patterns, AI algorithms can identify potential fraudulent behavior, which is obviously the biggest fear of most companies. So account takeovers, identity theft, unusual spending patterns, all of this can be picked up with AI, then and timeously intervening and assisting us by mitigating any losses. So I think it's important to note that AI, while it can really assist us in all of these areas that I've mentioned, it just has to work in conjunction with human expertise and oversight. The role of AI is to augment human capabilities, but in this instance, specifically in conveyancing, it will provide faster and more accurate analysis of large data sets, but the final decision should always stay that of a human judgment, you know, and an educated legal compliance behind that. So that's me. I think I'm going to hand over to Refqah, who's going to discuss estates and shed some more light on how AI systems could assist in the automating routine of her daily practice.
Thanks so much, Liezl. Hi, everyone. I'm Refqah Ho-Yee. AI advancements are both incredibly exciting and scary, and I'm really enjoying following the innovations in this space. I hope that if you haven't been following everything to do with AI, that following Brent's webinar and now ours, that you'll certainly start reading up. And it's important to note that while AI offers substantial benefits to various industries, it is essential, as my colleagues have mentioned previously, and I'll address that too, to always consider the ethical considerations and ensure that AI systems operate within legal, factual, and ethical boundaries. When attorneys are choosing to use and incorporate AI, we have to also exercise our own professional judgment and oversee the AI technologies and maintain, as Liezl says, client confidentiality, data security, and ethical conduct. I head STBB's Department of Wills, Estates, Trusts, and Curatorships. And today, I'm just going to be focusing on wills. Think about why you would need an AI tool before you start using it. Why would you prompt an AI tool to source information for you and then potentially even draft the will for you? In thinking about that, I can only assume it might be a cost-saving consideration, because it's certainly not a safer nor a more efficient way of ultimately having a legally sound will, and I'll chat to you about that. When you request a will, there's a two-step process of services. The one is obtaining the information and advice, and if you come to an attorney, that would be in the form of a consultation, be that face-to-face or maybe on Zoom or Teams. And the second step is ending up with a solid, sound, compliant and valid will. And I'm going to touch on both of those steps. So the first one, the consultation. When I consult on estate planning and a will, there are so many possible outcomes that to discuss as to what happens to your assets, and that would be your property, your investments. You might have assets and investments offshore. So we're talking about South African assets as well as offshore. Your loved ones, very, very important discussion point. Guardians, enough finances to support your dependents when you pass away. You might have business interests, you might have your own business, and we've got to chat about those, the expenses and liabilities that unfortunately don't die with you when you die. Certainly SARS is always looming. And then just a general discussion around the administration process, the timelines involved, the delays caused, the different government departments. So many consequences flow from a seemingly innocent question that you think you might be able as a layperson to just pose to an AI. So you'd prompt it and say, well, send me all the information about a South African executor, the rights, the responsibilities, who can act as executor. But so much flows from that question. And so there's also quite a shock to the system when I sit across from clients and chat to them, not only about the timeframes, but the costs involved, and things like which taxes are payable. And all of those discussions can evoke, different emotions. And so human sensitivity is not to be underestimated. It's quite important and valued by clients. And I think that would be missing if you were certainly just using an AI tool for prompts for information. So human connection and interaction between client and attorney is so important to end up with the best possible outcome. And that only comes out of the discussion that you and I have as my client. If you prompt an AI, no matter how advanced it is, and I mean, at the moment, it's incredible from week to week how it is advancing in leaps and bounds for various industries. The information that AI sources is limited, and also the AI sources based on what you prompted. And my colleagues Marco and certainly Brent last week, and also Liezl have touched on that, and Stefan will talk to that too a little bit later. So as the layperson, as the client, you're lacking that legal knowledge and experience to know what to ask. But as importantly, you wouldn't know what information's missing once the AI sends you the summary of advice that you've maybe prompted it around drafting a will. So an attorney's practical advice and knowledge and experience is so priceless when it comes to wills. Unfortunately, I see the negative impact on families when I see a poorly drafted will that wasn't drafted by our firm, and we're asked to intervene or to help administer, and I'm handed a will that unfortunately is lacking. And I fear when people try and do things themselves that's what we'll end up with. And rather than bypass the attorney, because our firm, we are all about innovation and advancement, and so I do recommend, as Liezl pointed out, how important and helpful it would be, and Marco as well, how it can enhance the attorney experience, and it can help us when we do rely on on AI tools that can assist. And certainly in the will space, we could incorporate AI tools to streamline our process. For example, using existing chatbots and using that type of function on our website so that we can include frequently asked questions and common terminology that will assist clients and prove beneficial to them so that they could be a bit more informed prior to a consultation. It'll also help us because if we, via a chatbot function, ask clients to complete and provide us with certain information in advance, we can certainly start putting together some documentation or have an idea of where the conversation could start. But this efficiency in obtaining information via chatbot functions, adds another level of security that we would need to implement as the firm using those AI tools. So disclaimers are going to be very important, and I'm sure you're seeing as you interact with corporates and various sites that you're seeing more and more disclaimers around using AI tools. So in using a chatbot, we would certainly have to put out reminders to clients that some of this information that you're maybe inserting and that we're providing to you prior to a consultation has been provided to you by a non-human, and that the answers will be verified when you do come to a consultation with an actual human. I hope you've been seeing our lovely bylines, that we're not just the big small firm, but we are the big small human firm. And that's so important. While technology is certainly efficient and it does speed things up and can and will speed things up for us, don't underestimate the value of the human connection, the value of the face-to-face consultation, and just that interaction. I think certainly post-pandemic, we saw that clients were craving that human connection and that physical interaction. People were also quite zoomed out, but thank you for staying online now. So don't underestimate that human experience, and also don't underestimate our experience generally. We learn on the job every day. With each interaction with a client, we get better, we see different scenarios, and you're comparing that to what you might think is a seemingly endless source of information from an AI, and it's not endless. It has its limitations, which my colleagues have mentioned, and Stefan will too, and certainly not in law and not in the South African legal environment. There isn't, we're not there yet, where we might not be there, where there's a seemingly endless source of info. So for example, during a will consultation, you're chatting to me and we're chatting about your assets, and it becomes apparent to me that you would need life cover to maybe cover the expenses involved in administering your estate, in the various transfer of assets that need to be taken care of, and so on. And and you'd miss out on that very valuable practical advice when you're still alive, when you're busy looking at your estate planning and drafting a will. It's not as simple as meeting with me to say, okay, I want that person to act as executor, those assets must go to this person. And also when you consult with me and you say things like, okay, one of my kids lives in Australia and one's living in the United Kingdom, and then I can chat to you about the practicalities of that. You can't actually, how are you going to get that jewelry to her? Jewelry can't be insured and transferred overseas. And, what are you putting in place so that if you're the breadwinner and all your bank accounts are being dealt with by ourselves, and, are there sufficient funds for your family to just carry on with your debit orders and expenses? And what if you've got your own business? And what about who's paying your employees' salaries if you don't have an electronic system, or your own accountant who does all of those payments for you? What happens when you've got a business where your clients are still, they still need to be serviced, right? You've got contracts that need to be filled. So there's so much that that comes into play when we consult on estate planning. So, I bring it back to the costings. It's really not worth limiting what you're going to get out of that experience just because you're trying to save maybe the costs of a consultation and a will with an attorney. It really is going to be worthwhile. The second step in that two-step process, so we've done the consultation, and the next step is, of course, drafting the will. So now some clients think, okay, I'm just going to bypass you. I might even come to the consultation, but I'm going to use an AI tool and try and draft a document. The first thing to remember is that wills are governed and regulated by the specific laws around the validity of those wills in every country. So if you are going to be reading up, please do make sure that you do specify that it's a South African will. And even that, there's just such a long list of reasons why you shouldn't, but I don't want to stop you from doing the research and equipping and educating and informing yourself. And then you can certainly come and chat to us about drafting that will. But how would you know as the layperson that if you give it all those prompts, you've done all that research, you've learned, maybe you're quite educated on how AI tools work and you know what to prompt it. How would you know when that AI tool sends you a document that you've asked it to draft, how do you know that it has produced a complete, legally valid, tax efficient document that has taken into account your concerns, your wishes, you know, your clear instructions you wanted to address so that you don't leave your family distressed, unsure, ill-advised, and hopefully not financially worse off? How would you know? You won't know. And that's certainly what, you know, what my colleagues have spoken about and what we've been reading up is that where's the, you know, where's that safety net? Where's that fact checking if you're relying on this tool to draft something as important as a will for you? And in coming to me as an attorney, it's quite easy for me and certainly my colleagues in my department to look at a drafted will, drafted elsewhere, and we can pick up the shortcomings. We can pick up the weak clauses. We can pick up the ambiguities that could be challenged or misinterpreted. And that opens the door to conflict and dispute, and that just adds to the delays and the costs, and it's all happening at a time when your family is grieving. And so, you know, it's very important that you really think long and hard about bypassing an experienced attorney in any scenario, but certainly in something as emotional and important as drafting your will. When you're drafting, I wanted to touch on cybersecurity risks and data privacy. If you haven't seen a will, if you don't have a will, generally your, you know, your personal information's in there. It's your name, your full names, your ID number, your address, your spouse's details as well. If you've got numerous properties, you're going to have property descriptions in the will. Some clients have things called special bequests where they're leaving a very specific asset or item of jewelry or piece of art or whatever to a specific heir or someone that they know. And so you're going to be mentioning those things. You might be listing, you know, those assets, that list of jewelry that's going to that granddaughter and so on. And so you're voluntarily offering all of this information to an AI tool. And that's quite scary. It poses a huge online security risk. Certainly, yes, the legal framework surrounding data privacy will and is evolving over the next few years, but there are immediate safeguards that exist for you to safely engage with attorneys right now. And so you provide, my clients provide all of that information to me right now quite safely. And, you know, based on the information provided to me, we can then draft a sound will for them. We certainly also have that additional safeguard for you. We offer the attorney-client privilege and confidentiality. We have professional negligence cover. As Liezl mentioned earlier, POPI is a big consideration, and POPI, the protection of personal information legislation, requires organizations and certainly law firms to take reasonable measures, and we do take reasonable measures to prevent loss, damage, or unauthorized access to personal information. If you embrace AI tools in your business, for example, chatbots, you need to also ensure that your clients are signing consents. And so our clients would not only consent as they do for us to use their personal information, but they would also have to consent to a third-party bot using the same. So just be really careful. It's going to be really interesting to also monitor any increases in cyber attacks, maybe with AI advancement. You know, AI is pure potential, and it's unfortunately exposed to all the pros and cons of the online world and social media. And so just be careful, you know, equip yourself, just read up and be advised. But when it comes to an important document like a will, which is, when you think about it, the only document that's going to regulate what happens to all of those hard-earned and worked for assets, the you know, your wishes for your children after you pass away, your legacy, your care for dependents that might not be able to mentally or physically care for themselves. Why would you entrust that to an AI tool and not consult with professionals? It certainly doesn't make sense to me. So I'm handing you over to my colleague, Stefan Hougaard, who's going to take the discussion further.
Thank you, Refqah. I hope you all can hear me. I see that there are some issues with sound, so just raise a hand or if I'm not audible. The risk of rehashing everything that my colleagues have said, I'm going to just touch upon the nature of litigation, how AI can play a role. As I'll discuss, the benefits do overlap a lot and the disadvantages as well, although I do think it's quite nuanced there. Just to give an idea about the nature of litigation, I am that attorney that I guess nobody ever wants to come to. I do dispute resolution. I am involved in a lot of acrimony. I help parties reconcile their differences and come to a resolution of their disputes. This can be done in various ways, either by going to court, doing it through arbitration or any such forum. So it's dispute resolution, or it can be seen as a manner in which to preserve your rights, to defend an action, to enforce a specific claim. Ultimately, it comes to the point of law where parties can't see eye to eye, and I think that's quite important to understand that nuances. It's not just necessarily the black and white, what does the law say? It's also what the party's version or what has happened, what the facts or what the evidence is, and I'll touch upon that when it comes to the disadvantages, in my view, of AI's involvement in litigation. So, as I said, there are various ways in which a dispute can be resolved, but in the context of this discussion and for the sensitivity of time, I think we can understand that most disputes, or some disputes, do end up in courts or before an arbitrator. So there's a third party adjudicator, and I'll get to that. That's, for me, specifically important when it comes to the disadvantages. But AI does have a place, in my view, when it comes to litigation. And as Marcus said, one pro is, of course, research. It does assist with research, but as Marcus indicated, it's not infallible. Unfortunately, the accuracy must always, in my view, be questioned. And I think Marcus specifically touched upon a case where there was an attorney that submitted specific citations to court. It actually happened in the US not too long ago in an aviation matter, personal injury matter. The attorney submitted 6 cases as citation, and it ended up being that all 6 cases were ultimately fabricated by the AI, in the sense that they fabricated the citation. So although I do believe that there is place for research in order to prompt the attorneys to follow the route of a specific legal principle and perhaps prompt certain legal thoughts, I do not think it's necessarily conclusive. In our law specifically, we although we've got a fair amount of legislation, or codified system as we call it, we do operate on precedent. So that would obviously be case law, but cases must always be applied to the facts. And more often than not, cases can be distinguishable, and that ultimately has to be argued. And I'll get to that when I talk about the disadvantages. As Liezl said, there's a big room for analytics when it comes to litigious matters. Viewing the facts that you can and the evidence that you can input into an AI system against the law. Unfortunately, there is, as I'll deal with the disadvantages, there is a lot of nuances to that as to why that can never be conclusive. So although it can assist with the analysis of one's case, it can comment on the possible outcome, the possible risk involved. It's never conclusive. And this, as Brent said, AI is largely dependent on what you put into the system, and that will determine the output. That's why, although there's room for the predictive analytics, sorry, the pronunciation is always difficult, the analysis of it, I do think that's never conclusive, as you're always reliant on what you put into the AI. One big advantage is e-discovery, and that has been around for quite some time. There are actually specific companies that actually cater for that service. So what discovery means in the litigation process is obviously when you would want to present your case leading up to trial or present your case, you have to discover the evidence that you have available to you. More importantly, you have to discover the relevant evidence available to you. That can be quite a mammoth task, and it's extremely important in the trial preparation stage. So what certain companies have done is they have automated, they've incorporated with AI to speed up that process. But what's important to note is that there will always be the human factor behind it. Although there's room for e-discovery, there will always be a human element to it. When it comes to drafting, I do think that AI has room in the litigation sphere, not so much in drafting the documents. I know Marcus touched upon the drafting of documents when it comes to AI, but in my context, the litigation context, it would be how arguments are formulated, how a specific paragraph in an affidavit is formulated. Ultimately, it comes down to language. It comes down to how your cases are presented. And I do think that certain AI engines, I guess ChatGPT is the most common example now, does help attorneys with that aspect of presenting a case, drafting. It can assist in formulating a specific argument where the words, I guess, do not come naturally to us. My boss has specifically said that we can actually use that as a supplemented tool to our drafting. And I know a colleague of mine also helps his colleagues in drafting certain paragraphs in affidavits using the AI tools. Now, I do think that AI has got room for it in litigation, but for me, I do think there are a lot more disadvantages at this stage, a lot more pitfalls. And this is greatly centered around the manner in which a case is presented. Now, fair enough, you've got your law, be it in terms of legislation or in case law, but it all depends on what the evidence say, what the facts are, how the versions of specific competing parties are determined. And I think that's where AI at this stage falls short and has a lot of room for error. In our country, we deal with an inquisitorial system. So you ultimately have a judge or an arbitrator that sits and that hears a matter, and that is inquisitive. He asks questions, he will prompt. And I think Refqah mentioned that earlier, is that what AI does not cater for is to ask the questions, to prompt a specific person as to what they have put into the AI system, i.e. what have they presented, to ask and to test the version further. That is very important, a big role in our legal system in dispute resolution. How to come to a specific resolution is the role that a third party plays. So I think that's something that one has to keep into account. So a big pitfall is the potential for bias. As Brent said earlier, and I've touched upon it, is that AI is greatly reliant on what is put into the system. So if you want to use AI to assist you in resolving your dispute, it will greatly be dependent on what has been put into that system in determining certain outcomes. And I do think that's where one has to be very careful. Exactly, garbage in, garbage out. One thing that's quite important, and Refqah said there's that human aspect, and when it comes to litigation is intuition and judgment that a human has. And that plays more to the strategic element of litigation. Ultimately, it's like a game of chess. People have to advance their case, but you have to follow certain strategies. And in our view, AI at this stage lacks the necessary intuition and judgment that a human brings to it, and foresight. Ultimately, as I said, AI is reliant on what you input, whereas an attorney can think about that, what hasn't yet been said. And I think that adds also to creative advocacy. That's ultimately what litigation attorneys do. Attorneys or advocates, as it says, I mean, you advocate a case for a specific person. You go and argue for that person. AI, in my view, at this stage, is quite lacking in that area, and why I definitely think that there's still a room for attorneys. And I guess that also comes to the creative problem solving, is that although one can look at it black and white, that's not always the be and end of all of dispute resolution. But for me, the most important aspect when it comes to litigation, and that's important in advancing a case and resolving it, is the manner in which evidence and facts are analyzed. In our legal system, you've got certain onuses to prove, and you've got certain burdens of proof. So for instance, in a criminal case, it's beyond reasonable doubt, and in a civil case, it's beyond balance of probability. So what the latter means is what version is the most probable. So to the extent that you've got competing facts in a case, aside from if it's dealt with on affidavit, how does a person determine what version will stand? You have to hear the evidence, you have to hear the oral evidence, you have to hear that in connection with specific documents. And it does not stop just by what is said. It doesn't stop just by what is black and white in the documents. There are certain evidentiary rules that come into play. The credibility of evidence must be tested. You have to look at a specific witness's demeanor there, whether the evidence is in conflict of what has been said previously. All that is grouped together in order for a judge to make a ruling on what is the most probable version, and that will result in what the outcome of the case will be. Fair enough, Brent has told me that they are working on that when it comes to AI, specifically facial cues and facial recognition, and how that can play into a person's demeanor. Although I would love to see how they work that into dispute resolution. I do think that, I don't think it will necessarily be conclusive, because as I said, it's a group of evidence, it's a group analysis of the evidence, or a group evaluation of the evidence that a judge must make. And sometimes trials can take, months. And I can go on this topic for quite some time. I do feel quite passionate about that. And on that point as well, you need to look at, like I said, evidentiary rules. Our law is not just substantive law, it's also procedural and rules of evidence. And there are a litany of exceptions that come into play that one has to take into account. And I don't think that AI at this stage is necessarily the conclusive answer for that. Specifically, in litigation, the issue of liability comes into play. Refqah mentioned that professional indemnity insurance, ultimately, litigation attorneys would present a case, but to the extent that the attorneys are negligent, there would be some sort of insurance in play, which is obligatory for us. The question is, where does that come in play in AI? I don't think at this stage it's quite catered for just yet. I think a last point, the understanding of South African law, or the application or the interpretation of South African law, I think is something that AI cannot conclusively take over at this stage. And you need that human element. And this all, is mashed into the strategy of litigation, how you present your case, how you take it forward, how the other party reacts, how you play on that. And I think, unfortunately, in our country, finances still come into play when it comes to resolving a dispute. We ultimately service providers, and unfortunately, sometimes decisions about a case is made based more on how the financial impact will be for a specific person. And I think that comes into play with risk analysis. So, I can really go on forever. I do think there are a lot of disadvantages at this stage for litigation, but yes, there are benefits. But in conclusion, I guess the title of today's talk was not necessarily a rhetorical question, is that, can I use AI instead of my attorney? I think, as you've seen, we would say no, you can't. It can supplement an attorney's role. It can add to our service delivery. It can assist with expediency. It can assist with data analysis, as Liezl said. Can it substitute your attorney? No, I don't think so. Can it substitute a judge? I really don't think so. So, yeah, our conclusion at this stage is no. AI will not necessarily be used instead of your attorney, and we would urge you to still, reach out to us, reach out to any attorney. Just stick to that human element for now.
Thank you so much to all the presenters. We have actually quite a few questions. So if there are any other questions, you're more than welcome to start posting them into the chat, and then we can get right into them. So I think the first question that I wanted to pose, and as you've all seen, Brent is also on, and is regarding FICA and how that would actually work in terms of, I think, the practicality of it. How is AI going to supplement that verification process in terms of FICA and document verification within South Africa and conveyancing specific? And the question that we had was, whether it's going to be a plug-in model, or how does this actually work practically speaking?
Thanks, Liani. So yes, when you look at these tools, you must remember that nothing gets provided for free. These tools cost a lot of money to make, and they are made because someone's trying to make money from them in essence. And when you get provided something that seems to be free and you don't see what the product is, the simple answer is that you are the product. But with a lot of these tools, you see prescription prices and things like that, where you're actually paying for the service. And yes, there are some of those tools where you pay, you get a return, but you can't feed it figure documents and those type of things. But there are other tools that actually do analyze documents. There are some tools that will take document data and go and read that up and analyze it against other databases and so forth. And when you provide a package that incorporates a whole bunch of those tools, you can have something that looks at FICA. So there are companies that already do those type of things. So the South African space, there are multiple, but one of them would be a product like DocFox, where they take documents that you feed into the system, like an ID, it pre-verifies it to see that it is an actual ID. It takes the contents from that, it verifies it against the South African database to see if it's actually the correct person as registered at Home Affairs. It'll take things like your proof of address. It'll check that it looks like a valid document. It'll take the data from that. It'll verify that against other data sources that look up your details as to what it thinks your proof of address would be, as well as that actual physical site. Is that actually what seems to be a home, or is it a vacant land, etc., etc.? So there are tools that already do that. Obviously, that some people have had to take the existing AI tools and build some additional tools around them, incorporate maybe 1, 2, 3, or multiple different AI methodologies behind the scene, and they then charge you for what they've done. So things like DocFox, etc., will not be free. And there's not just one, there are multiple, and as time goes forward, there will be more and more of those. It is possible, however, if you want to build your own tools, you can go take a look at the Google and Microsoft document analysis tools. Some of them are pre-trained for other country IDs at this stage, but it's not very difficult to train it yourself on South African IDs or South African passports from that point of view. And then you can leverage and use that. It's not very pricey, but you'd have to go and do a little bit of fiddling yourself. So definitely the tools do exist, and it's not something that is readily or easily accessible to people that don't have some knowledge. So I hope that answers that one.
Thank you. So the next question also regarding contracts and signing, but I think this is specifically more with conveyancing, where we still have the wet ink, rule in terms of legislation that we have to apply. So Estelle has a question stating that would that be possible, like a wet ink type of system with AI technology going forward, similar like with what the banks do, or with fingerprints or something to that extent. So I don't know if Liezl, you want to comment, and Brent, you want to comment on that.
So I'll jump in. So the current restriction on electronic signatures is in terms of any transaction noted in the Alienation of Land Act, which obviously in the conveyancing or property industry severely impacts our signing of our office to purchase and our powers of attorney to pass transfer. I definitely do think, like the rest of the world, South Africa will get there, and we'll get to a verification point where we do use sort of like Brent, you're going to have to help me here, but like signatures that have been encrypted with your ID verification, maybe biometric verification, so that we can know that that is the specific person who has signed and that person has been identified and verified. We aren't there yet, but it's definitely, we are working towards it. South Africa is going to get there. But for the moment, I don't think we have the necessary tools and the protective sort of technology for such a big transaction to get to that. But Brent, maybe you can just speak, you can see into the future more than I can.
So there's a big difference when it comes to a digital signature and digitally certified or digital certificate signed documents. A digital certificate requires you actually owning a digital certificate to prove the authenticity that it is you. It has to be registered with a certificate provider. So until such time as everyone in the country has access to something like a digital certificate that's been authenticated to be you, it doesn't really apply. But there are some countries that have done that. And in fact, the new South African ID cards have actually been designed with that in mind. And in the background, it actually can facilitate digital certificates. So once the country is ready, they will probably start rolling out signing of digital certificates linked to your ID card. And you'd be able to then digitally sign using a digital certificate. At that point, obviously, it will start becoming viable to incorporate things like digital signatures on alienation of land. Whereas at the moment we don't have that. It's a bit of a hurdle for our country because of access to these type of things for the majority of people. And that's probably why we are lagging. But investigations are underway in all these things, and it will eventually come. Obviously, AI can enhance those technologies even further by doing things like adding in not just facial recognition, and the facial recognition per se has actually improved quite a lot to actually see that it's a human face that's moving, not just a static face that could have been used to supplement. And also with your recognition into your well, the eye. I can't remember just offhand what the name is, but scanning your eyes to see who you really are. That database will eventually be built up, and that's a far more secure way of doing things as well. There's just some, so Apple phones do that, for instance, already. As to whether these things work in well-lit areas, less lit areas, etc., is a hurdle for future, but eventually those things will be overcome as well, and they'll start incorporating them.
Great. Yeah, I think definitely, this is where it's all headed, and only to aid us. So I see there was quite a discussion, Stefan, just regarding translation and court and language. I don't know if you have any further comments on the question that was posed and your answers in respect of that.
Well, yeah, I responded in the chat. I totally agree. I mean, those are even topics that I haven't even touched upon. As I said, there are just so many more elements involved in litigation than just the black and white law applied to the facts. You now actually have social, economic issues that are in play as well when it comes to language barriers and with translators involved. And as I said, that's even more applicable in our country. I mean, if you consider that we've got 11 official languages. So that's something that I think AI is currently lacking. Will it ever catch up? I guess one can never say never. And there was another question, I think it was by the same individual, was perhaps rhetorical, but if attorney falls away, who replaces judge? And I think that was what I was also getting at a bit more with my talk. It's not necessarily will the attorney fall away, but it's also a question about who's actually going to make the decision at the end of the day. And because what I've illustrated as to how complex it can be, I don't think at this stage AI will conclusively take over. Sure, you can get your more rudimental, simple disputes, and I guess they will be placed for that. But I can tell you now, law can be quite complex. So yeah.
Great. So I then want to read Alexander's question, and Brent, this is probably part of your field as well, to how STBB is going to innovate. So Alexander says, you would probably not want to use a commercially available AI product, as they could potentially have permission to use the data you feed it, which includes the private data of clients. If this is the case, you would want to use your own model, and the quality of this model then depends on the data that the company has. How would STBB gather this data and furthermore ensure that the data remains private?
Yes, so obviously when STBB looks at tools of any sort, whether they be AI related or not, we consider all those factors, and we need to have agreements and things in place before we enter into any third parties as to what any data, what is done with any data. When there is any likelihood that there may be data being used in fashions that we aren't happy with, we don't get involved with those products. So we have obviously been looking at various AI products, some third parties, some not. We are looking at creating some of our own products, but until such time as we can verify that they are safe, secure, and not in any way infringing on our clients, we can't adopt them and use them. So as and when we come across things, when we can look at it fully, understand, and have proper legal contracts that bind the use of the data behind that, and also not just a case of use a third-party product, but in no way allow our data to be used to train that product, because there's a big difference between using a product and using your data to train that product. So we will never use client data to train the product. We have large volumes of structural data that can be used to train products, but not specific client data. We won't use that at any point, nor pass that on to be used.
Thank you. And I think that's also obviously the, in respect of the consents that clients sign with us. So you can always be ensured of that fact when you deal with STBB. So just I think the last two questions is Clarinelda asked, which tool did you talk about that can identify whether there is a piece of land or open land?
So quite simply, just Google Earth is a simple way to do that, where it just zooms into that location. So the AI takes a look at the address, it maps it back to something like Google Earth. It zooms in to look at the land to see what is currently there. Not this Google Street View, because that could be slightly outdated, but Google Earth, which is fairly up to date. So that's the satellite view. However, some of these commercial products have their own satellite imaging that they use for that. But from a layman's point of view, you could actually just go to Google Earth, scan and look at it. If it's vacant land, you know it's not the right thing. If you've got low volume and you need to just go and double check those things, you can definitely leverage those products.
Great, thank you. And then Marco, there was a question just regarding the case law that you research in ChatGPT, whether it was South African cases specifically, or exactly which ones were case law did you actually research?
I was looking at the powers of homeowners associations in South Africa and whether they can buy private land. And ChatGPT gave me 6 cases, all of which were fake. So yes, it was South African, but it doesn't, those cases doesn't exist. So I don't know what you call them then.
So I think those are all the questions that we had. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's session. I hope you found it very informative, just hearing from all our experts at STBB regarding AI and the way forward in terms of the legal world and how we see AI and also the benefits that it poses to us at STBB and also benefiting our clients thereby utilizing some of those aspects. So thank you everyone for joining us. We would love to hear your feedback in the comments regarding your webinar experience with STBB. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact STBB at marketing1@stbb.co.za. We'll be posting that in the chat shortly. So any questions you can pose to there and we will answer them and direct them accordingly. We'll also be making the recording available to all the registrants to this session. So once again, thank you everyone for joining today, and thank you to all the presenters for sharing your legal knowledge and Brent, your specialized IT knowledge or developer knowledge regarding AI and the way forward. So that's it from our side, guys. Have a good long weekend. And we will see you in our next session regarding the estate agent's guide in terms of AI and how it can benefit the estate agent specifically.